Did you know that certain foods that seem harmless can turn into real health traps simply because they're stored incorrectly? And we're not talking about processed foods or those full of preservatives. I'm talking about natural foods, which many believe they're protecting by placing in the fridge. But in reality, this could be generating dangerous toxins, destroying nutrients, and even increasing the risk of diseases like cancer, diabetes, and metabolic disorders. Have you ever stored raw potatoes in the fridge thinking they'd last longer, or that overripe tomato? And what about the bread you toss in the fridge to keep it from going bad? Well, all of that could be doing much more harm than good. In this video, I'll tell you about the hidden effects of refrigeration on these foods and what you need to do to protect your health. I'm Kenji Oshiro, and this is the Global Health Guide channel. Subscribe now so you don't miss any tips that could literally change your life. Let's get straight to the point. The first mistake millions of people make every day is storing raw potatoes in their refrigerator. It seems like a logical choice, right? After all, cold preserves. But with potatoes, the opposite happens. The starch in potatoes turns into sugar much faster when exposed to the cold of the fridge. And that's where the problem starts, because when that potato is baked or fried at high temperatures, that sugar reacts with amino acids to form a toxic compound called acrylamide. That's right, acrylamide. A compound that science has linked to an increased risk of ovarian, esophageal, kidney, and even endometrial cancer. Have you ever noticed a potato that's overly golden, crispy, or even with burnt spots? That crispy crust that many people love is loaded with these toxins. And the worst part, even if that potato looks well cooked and doesn't appear burnt, if it was refrigerated before cooking, the acrylamide levels can be much higher, even if you can't taste it. But it doesn't stop there. The humidity in the fridge also promotes the growth of mold, bacteria, and fungi. So besides being toxic, the potato spoils faster. It gets soft, darkens, and you end up throwing it away. So, what should you do? The best way to store potatoes is the old-fashioned way. Outside the fridge, in a dry, well-ventilated place away from light. Preferably in a basket or cloth bag, and never in plastic bags. If possible, eat them with the skin. It helps control blood sugar spikes. And one more thing, when cooking, avoid temperatures above 180 degrees C. Now, pay attention because the next mistake is even more common. Storing tomatoes in the fridge. That's right, their refrigerator drawer is often full of them. But what many people don't know is that cold temperatures damage the tomato's internal membranes, affecting its texture, flavor, and most worryingly, its nutritional value. When you put a tomato in the fridge, it stops ripening naturally. And it's this ripening process that enhances the action of a powerful antioxidant, lycopene. Lycopene has protective effects against premature aging, cardiovascular diseases, inflammation, and even certain types of cancer. It helps reduce cellular oxidation, the silent rusting of the body. So when you refrigerate a tomato, you prevent this antioxidant from working as it should. And that's not to mention the texture. Who hasn't bitten into a cold, watery tomato with a strange taste? That's the cold destroying the fruit structure from the inside. The solution is simple. Store tomatoes outside the fridge in an airy basket away from direct sunlight. And here's a tip. If you want to speed up the ripening of a green tomato, place it near a banana or an apple. These fruits release ethylene, which naturally accelerates ripening. But avoid eating tomatoes with very green parts. They contain solanine, a substance that can be toxic. Speaking of bread, let's move on to the third most common mistake. Storing bread in the fridge thinking it protects against mold. This is a classic. The problem is that cold accelerates the loss of moisture in bread and breaks down its internal structure. The result, hard, dry bread with no aroma or flavor. And if it's whole grain or naturally fermented, it's even worse. Plus, the humidity in the fridge can have the opposite effect of what you want. Instead of preventing mold, it promotes its growth. That's right. The inside of a refrigerator may seem dry, but there's actually a lot of humidity circulating, which speeds up mold formation. So, How do you store bread correctly? If you're going to eat it within 2 days, keep it in an airtight container or cloth bag away from light and humidity. Now, if you want to store it longer, freeze it. Yes, freezing bread is the safest way to preserve its nutrients and avoid waste. And there's more. When frozen and then heated in a toaster, oven, or skillet, bread forms resistant starch, a type of fiber that improves digestion, balances blood sugar, and feeds your gut microbiota. Before we move on to the next foods that are being stored incorrectly and harming your health, tell me in the comments, do you usually store any of these 3 foods in the fridge? Have you ever heard of acrylamide? Now, let's move on to part 2. Tell me, have you ever put a green avocado in the fridge thinking it would preserve it better? Well, know that this common practice can completely ruin the texture, flavor, and nutrients of one of the healthiest fruits in the world. Avocados are sensitive to cold, especially when they're not yet ripe. When refrigerated too early, the enzymes responsible for their natural ripening are deactivated. The result, a fruit that's hard on the outside, fibrous inside with dark spots, a bitter taste, and a lower concentration of active compounds. What few people realize is that this timing mistake can prevent the avocado from reaching its full potential. It loses some of its healthy fats, fibers that regulate the gut, and antioxidants important for heart and brain health. The solution? Let the avocado ripen outside the fridge at room temperature. And here's an easy trick to speed up the process. Place the avocado in a paper bag with a banana or an apple. These fruits release ethylene, a natural gas that stimulates ripening. In 1 or 2 days, you'll have an avocado ready to eat. Now, if the fruit is already ripe, then you can store it in the fridge, buttonly for a maximum of 2 days. And if it's cut, store it with a few drops of lemon or a slice of lime over the pulp. This prevents oxidation and keeps the color vibrant and the flavor fresh for longer. And if you know you won't use it in the next few days, freeze it. Frozen avocado remains highly nutritious, especially for sauces, spreads, or guacamole. It can be stored this way for up to 6 months. Now pay attention because the next food is one of the most consumed in the world and almost always stored incorrectly. The banana. Most people put bananas in the fridge as soon as they get home from the market. And that's a mistake. The bananas peel. Ice extremely sensitive to cold. When refrigerated, it starts to darken quickly, even if the flesh is still good. This reaction isn't about ripening, but about the degradation of natural pigments. And inside, the effect is even worse. Cold changes the banana's texture, making it mealy with an altered taste and fewer bioavailable nutrients. But here's a very important detail. Theraper the banana, the higher its glycemic index. That means it releases sugar into the blood, faster causing glucose and insulin spikes. This promotes hunger, fat accumulation, and over time can increase the risk of diseases like insulin, resistance diabetes, and even certain types of cancer. So, the best way to eat a banana is at the right point with a yellow peel. No dark spots or overly soft areas. To store it better, avoid cold and do this. Wrap the stems with aluminum foil or plastic wrap. This slows down ethylene release and delays natural ripening, keeping the fruit fresh longer. And if you want to freeze-ripe bananas to avoid waste, great. Peel, slice, store in containers or freezer bags, and use later in smoothies, pancakes, or healthy desserts. Now we come to a very serious point. A powerful food that, if stored incorrectly, can become a real health risk. Garlic. Yes, garlic. So praised for its medicinal properties, and rightly so, can lose much of its potency if you store it in the fridge. And worse, under certain conditions, it can even promote the growth of dangerous bacteria. Let's break it down. When you store raw garlic in the fridge, especially if it's already chopped or peeled, the cold stimulates early sprouting. Those green shoots that appear in the middle of the cloves indicate that the garlic's metabolism has changed. This reduces the presence of allicin, the most important active compound in garlic, responsible for its anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, and heart and brain protective effects. But the bigger problem comes when people make that homemade mix of chopped garlic with olive oil, store it in a jar, and leave it at room temperature. It seems practical, right? But it's extremely dangerous. This combination creates a perfect environment for the growth of Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium that causes botulism, a serious illness that can affect the nerves, cause paralysis, and even lead to death in extreme cases. So what should you do? Store whole garlic with its peel in a dry, cool, airy place away from direct light. And if you want to have chopped garlic on hand without risks, freeze it. Just chop. Place small portions in mold-sore bags and keep in the freezer. This way, you preserve flavor, properties, and safety. Now, we've reached the final food on this list, and perhaps the most surprising, honey. For years, honey has been seen as a healthier alternative to sugar. And yes, it has natural compounds with anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and antioxidant properties, but all of that can be wasted or even become a risk if you store it incorrectly. A common mistake is storing honey in the fridge. Many people do this thinking it preserves it better, but the opposite happens. Cold causes a process called crystallization, where the honey's natural sugar separates from the water. This makes it grainy, opaque, harder, and difficult to use. Here's the problem. Many people seeing crystallized honey think it's spoiled and they try to fix it in the worst way, putting it in the microwave or heating it directly in a pan. But when honey is heated above 40 degrees C, it loses much of its enzymes and antioxidants. In other words, it loses its medicinal potency. So, the best way to store honey is simple at room temperature in a tightly sealed jar away from sunlight and humidity. This way, you preserve its natural texture, aroma, and beneficial properties. But here's a critical point. Despite being natural, honey is rich in sugar, and that means excessive consumption carries the same risks as refined sugar. It raises blood sugar, overloads the pancreas, increases triglycerides, and can promote fat accumulation in the liver and chronic inflammation. Honey is not a harmless food. It's powerful, yes, but it should be used like medicine in moderation. 1 teaspoon, once or twice a day, can be beneficial in specific cases like forecolds or sore throats, but using it as a daily sugar substitute in everything can have the opposite effect of what you expect. So if you consume honey thinking it's healthier than any sugar, be careful, because in the end, if consumed in excess, your body will react the same way. Insulin spikes, more hunger, more abdominal fat, and a higher risk of metabolic diseases. To recap, here are the 7 foods you should no longer store in the fridge. Raw potatoes, they become a source of acrylamide, potentially carcinogenic. Tomatoes, they lose flavor, texture, and antioxidants like lycopene. Bread, it dries out, loses properties, and promotes mold. Avocados, if stored green, ripening stalls, and they lose nutrients. Bananas, they darken, change flavor, and increase their glycemic index. Garlic, it can sprout, lose allicin, and even cause botulism. If poorly stored, honey, it crystallizes in the cold and loses properties if overheated. If you've made one or more of these mistakes, don't blame yourself. Most people do this, thinking they're taking care of their health. But now you know the truth, and with simple changes, you can better protect your food and your body. Tell me in the comments which of these mistakes have you made without knowing. Do you usually refrigerate any of these foods thinking you are doing the right thing? If this content helped you in any way, like the video, share it with someone in your family, and subscribe to the Healthy Life 365 channel. See